بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So welcome back to our third video from the series on Adalat al-Sahaba. In the first video we went over the definition of what a Sahabi is. In the second video we addressed the concept of Adalah. Now in this video inshallah we are going to go over the positive arguments on why we think the Sahaba are trustworthy and why they are adul. Now in this context, the Shia, Hadith rejectors and other deviant sects often strawman and misrepresent the Sunni stance. And so they present the matter as though we, Ahl Sunnah, call for a blind acceptance of all the Sahaba, and that we simply do not evaluate anything they do. We believe that they're essentially infallible by implication. Now this cannot be further from the truth. In fact, we Ahl Sunnah have no problem scrutinizing the Sahaba and evaluating their actions and holding it to scrutiny according to the Quran and the Sunnah. The only difference is, after doing that, we came to a conclusion that most of them are trustworthy people. And we have several examples from the classical Sunni scholarship where this is displayed. For example, I found a quote by the great scholar As-San'ani, where he is writing a commentary on a previous work by the scholar Ibn al-Wazir. Ibn al-Wazir says, القول بعدالة الصحابة كلهم في الظاهر إلا من قام الدليل على أنه فاسق تصريحا. So there he says, ومن مهمات هذا الباب القول بعدالة الصحابة كلهم. So he says, one of the main points in this chapter is the belief or the notion that all of the Sahaba, or most of the Sahaba, are udul as apparent, except those who were proven to be fusaq. This is very interesting, because he mentions this exception, and it's very rarely mentioned in the context of hadith transmission. So what does As-San'ani say? ولما كان هذا الاستثناء منكرا لأن أهل الحديث يطلقون القول بعدالتهم من غير استثناء قال المصنف ولا بد من هذا الاستثناء على جميع المذاهب وأهل الحديث وإن أطلقوا القول بعدالة الصحابة كلهم عند الإجمال فإنهم يستثنون من هذه صفته عند تفاصيلهم لإفراد الصحابة وإنما لم يذكروه في مقام الإجمال لندوره فنزلوا النادر منزلة العدم. So, very interesting excerpt from his book. So what As-San'ani says is, yes, our belief is that the majority of the Sahaba are udul, and that they're trustworthy as well. However, the ones that were proven to be fusaq among them are rejected from this notion. And the reason this qayd, or this requirement, is often not listed is because it's very rare. It's very rare to find Sahaba that actually fell under this category, and so they don't mention it because it's practically non-existent. And I came upon another interesting quote by Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, where he says, وَأَصْحَابُ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يعرف فيهم من تعمد عليه كذبا. So the companions of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, it's not been proven once that any of them fabricated a lie or forged a hadith and attributed it to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. And then he says, وَمَعْ هذا فقد جرب أصحاب النقد والامتحان أحاديثهم واعتبروها بما تعتبر به الأحاديث فلم يوجد عند أحد منهم تعمد كذبة بخلاف القرن الثاني فإنه كان في أهل الكوفة جماعة يتعمدون الكذب. So Ibn Taymiyyah says, the Sahaba, there was not a single individual among them who was known to attribute lies to the Prophet ﷺ. However, even with that being said, their hadith has been tested, it has been scrutinized and evaluated by the early hadith critics. And they took the context of those reports and the general indicators along with them, and they did not find that any of them had ever purposely fabricated a lie or forged a report. Unlike the second generation of Tabi'in from Al-Kufa, where liars did exist. So what does this quote show you? It shows you that we Ahl Sunnah, we don't simply blindly accept everything that comes from a Sahabi just because they were Sahaba. Rather, we have no problem scrutinizing them, going over their reports, going over their biographies, and coming out with a verdict. And based on our evidence, it seems that Ahl Sunnah came to a conclusion that they are all generally trustworthy people. Now, to give you a few examples of Sahaba we have no problem criticizing, and our scholars criticize as well, we have several names, one of them being the man known by Busr bin Arta'a. So Abdullah, I think you have some content on him, if you could go ahead.
Yes, so we have two names as examples. One of them is Abdurrahman ibn Udays al-Balawi, and the other one is Busr ibn Abi Arta'. So about Busr ibn Abi Arta', Ad-Daraqutni, as can be found in Su'alat al-Sulami, he first mentions Busr, and he affirms that he's a companion. After doing so, he comments and says, لم يكن له استقامة بعد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. He did not remain upright after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. And then now the second example we have is for Abdurrahman ibn Udays al-Balawi. Ibn Sa'd talks about him in Tabaqat. And he says, Abdurrahman ibn Udays al-Balawi صاحب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وسمع منه وكان في من رحل إلى عثمان حين حصر حتى قتل وكان رأسا فيهم. He said Abdurrahman ibn Udays al-Balawi, he accompanied the Prophet, heard from him, and he was amongst those who surrounded Uthman until he was killed, and he was a leader from amongst them. كان رأسا فيهم. So in both examples you find that in the first one Ad-Daraqutni and the second one Ibn Sa'd, they're criticizing two of these companions.
And so they acknowledged that they were companions, yet they had no issue criticizing them for actions they did and calling them out.
That's correct.
Okay, because they often present it as though we Ahlul Sunnah, we're trying to hide these facts and we're shy of discussing this. And when you actually go back to the scholarly literature, our scholars had no issue being objective and impartial when evaluating their lives. Okay, now regarding Adala, there are several points we can make, or arguments, to show why we think the Sahaba are Udul, and they are trustworthy transmitters from the Prophet ﷺ. Now, the first point is that the Sahaba, as transmitters, they often transmitted reports that went against their own interests. And I know that you have some points regarding this.
Yes. So, the first point is, many a time we find the Sahaba, the companions, they transmit reports that are not in their own interest to transmit. And we have several examples mentioned. The first one is one from Aisha. And Aisha radiallahu anha, essentially in this report, what she does is she relays that she was jealous of Khadija, and she mentioned the Prophet's love for Khadija and a special status that Allah gave her. So the hadith says, قالت ما غرت على امرأة ما غرت على خديجة ولقد أمره ربه أن يبشرها ببيت في الجنة. He said, I was not jealous of any woman like I was jealous of Khadija. Allah Azza wa Jal ordered the Prophet Muhammad to give her glad tidings of a house in Jannah. So now here, this report, it doesn't reflect very well on Aisha, that she's jealous, and then Allah Azza wa Jal gave her a special status and something like that. So the fact that she transmitted this is an indicator that she's telling the truth. She's being honest here.
So if she's trying to tell a lie, or she's a liar, it would not be in her interest to portray the Prophet's other wife, Khadija, in a good manner, right?
Yeah, or her being jealous.
Yeah.
Like, I was never a jealous person or something like that, you know?
Yeah, or the Prophet ﷺ was always talking about me, never mentioned Khadija. So that's something that would be more reasonable if she were a liar. There's actually another example I have from Aisha radiallahu anha, which is a famous hadith in Sahih Muslim, where the story essentially goes by Aisha transmitting that she was one day asleep in her house, and it was her turn, so the Prophet ﷺ was staying at her place, and suddenly the Prophet ﷺ got up and left the house, and she sensed it and she woke up, and she followed him, and apparently she wasn't supposed to follow him, since she didn't have his permission. And so she saw him, walk in the dark, and she followed him, and the Prophet ﷺ apparently sensed that there was someone following him, so he turned around, and he started to walk back home. And she ran back home, she raced back home, trying to make sure that he doesn't get back home and find the house empty. And so when the Prophet ﷺ finally arrived, he saw that she was panting, and she was out of breath. And he asked her, what happened? It's not normal for someone in the middle of the night to suddenly be out of breath. And she said nothing. He said, either you shall inform me, or Allah will inform me regarding what has happened. And she told him what happened. You left the house, and I followed you, and then I went back, and whatnot. And she said, the Prophet ﷺ nudged me after that. And then he told her, Jibreel called me, and he told me to make istighfar for the people of Al-Baqi'. And I saw that you were asleep, and I didn't want to wake you up. And I didn't want to wake you up so that you wouldn't feel lonely at the night as well, throughout the night. And so I just left, and plan to come back later. And then he teaches her the dua Jibreel taught him at the end of the hadith. Now, what's interesting about this report, Aisha is reporting a mistake that she did with the Prophet ﷺ. She's saying something that could be used against her, right? If she's a liar, this would not be in her interest. This is an indicator that she was telling the truth when she reported this. And there's a lot of other examples, tens of other examples, from Aisha and from other Sahaba. I know you have another Sahabi, who is Usama bin Zayd, right?
Yes, Usama bin Zayd, for example, there's a story he transmits about himself, that in one of the battles, he was engaging a man in hand-to-hand combat, and the man said the Shahada. He said, La ilaha illallah. And instead of, taking a step back, Usama ibn Zayd proceeded to kill him. And mind you, Usama is the one who's transmitting this story. So once the news of this reaches the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ becomes furious. And he asked him, he said, he responded very angrily to him. He said that essentially, did you open his heart? شققت عن قلبه? What will you do with La ilaha illallah on the day of judgment? ماذا تصنع بلا إله إلا الله? So he became visibly angry with him over this. I mean, he killed a person that he was not supposed to kill. And as we said, Usama ibn Zayd transmits this.
And in the hadith, the Prophet keeps on repeating that phrase.
Yes.
ماذا تصنع بلا إله إلا الله.
Yep.
It was really mad.
And Usama ibn Zayd mentions that how much he regretted. He said, I wish I only became Muslim at that point. Now, Usama ibn Zayd would certainly lack the motivation to transmit this, right? It reflects poorly on him. Not only did he commit an action that is deemed sinful, but it's such a grave act that the Prophet became visibly angry with him. And there's a close connection between Usama ibn Zayd and the Prophet. There's many more accounts about Usama ibn Zayd that would have been better, portray him in better light. He has many virtues, and they're transmitted from other companions even.
Yeah.
So he would have no interest in transmitting this report, which reflects poorly on him, had he not been honest. Yeah.
We have another example from the Sahabi Abu Dharr al-Ghifari radiallahu anhu.
Yes.
You know that?
So this is so Usama bin Zayd, by the way, that was in the Sahihain. Abu Dharr is also in the Sahih. So essentially, he cursed a man. Cursed the ayyarahu bi ummihi. He attacked a person by his mother. He cursed the mother of a person, and the Prophet ﷺ told him, "Innakum ru'un fika jahiliya." You're a person who still has some of the old, jahili, the pre-Islamic ignorance in you. And Abu Dharr is the one who transmitted this. Probably, had Abu Dharr not transmitted this, we would have never known this happened. Yet Abu Dharr, met somebody and he transmitted the incident to him, said, I did such and such sin, and he admitted to it, and he said, and the Prophet told me this.
So the point is, we have a lot of examples like this from the Sirah and from the Sunnah and from the books of Hadith. And what these examples show is that the Sahaba were trustworthy people. Why? If they were liars, they'd have no interest in transmitting reports that reflect poorly on them as people, showing how they made mistakes with the Prophet ﷺ, how the Prophet was angry with them, how they were corrected, and whatnot. That would not be in the interest of a liar. So I think this is a very strong point. Now, another important point we need to bring up is that most of the reports the Sahaba transmit are called disinterested historical accounts. So you can go over what that is and elaborate on that in the context of the Sunnah. That would be great.
So, much of the hadith literature is essentially mundane reports. Reports that no forger would have an interest in forging. I saw the Prophet ﷺ make wudu one time. Marratan marra, like he would only wipe once.
Mm-hmm.
No one really has an interest in this, right? So these disinterested reports, these are reports no one has an interest in fabricating or forging. And you have, the majority of the sunnahs like this. Abu Hurairah, for example, he transmitted a hadith praising Quraysh, the women of Quraysh. Now, Abu Hurairah is not a woman, and he's also not a Qurashi. he transmitted the hadith خير نساء ركبن الإبل نساء قريش. The best of the women who rode on camels are the women of Quraysh. And as we mentioned, right, he's not a woman. He's not from Quraysh either. He's from Daws. He's Yemeni. He has no interest in forging this report, right? And yet he transmits it.
So the fact that most of their reports are disinterested historical accounts, it tells you that it's very improbable that they were all liars who were fabricating these reports, because a liar would probably fabricate something for personal interests, right?
Definitely.
Okay. We have another very important point. This is actually really important, and it's the concept of corroborations. So if you can go over what a corroboration is and contextualize it to the Sunnah, that would be great.
So, when it comes to the transmission of reports, reports can either be exclusive or they can be corroborated. So, exclusive, obviously, as the name suggests, is when you have only one person who transmits it. Then a corroborated report is when you have multiple people transmitting the same report, and this definitely gives it strength. So, much there's many hadith, much of transmission from the companions is corroborated. They corroborate each other's accounts. You have a famous, all these mutawatir hadith, right? Whoever lies about me intentionally, let him take a seat in the hellfire.
You know what's interesting about this hadith is that Ibn Salah mentions in his Muqaddimah that it's transmitted through over 70 different Sahabis. So just as an example.
Yeah, and you have a hadith that are translated by dozens of Sahabis. You have the hadith man ahabba liqa Allah, ahabba Allah liqa'ah, wa man kariha liqa Allah, kariha Allah liqa'ah. It's established from Abu Hurairah, from Anas ibn Malik, from Aisha, from Ubadah ibn Samit, and others. So a lot of the hadith literature is corroborated from the companions themselves, which definitely indicate not only honesty, but it also indicates something else. It indicates their accuracy in the transmission of these reports as well.
Indeed. So we have another point after that. This is also a pretty good point, which is that the Sahaba often transmitted from each other. So if you can expound on that a bit, because it's a bit convoluted, and go over that point, that would be great.
So the Sahaba, a habit of the Sahaba is to transmit from each other and acquire reports from each other. Not all the companions, attended every single gathering of the Prophet, right? So they relied on each other for information about the Prophet. Now, you have, for example, Muawiyah. He wrote to Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, asking him to send him a hadith that he heard from the Prophet. Now, if Muawiyah is a forger, what interest does he have in acquiring these reports from Al-Mughira? If he's a forger, he'll just make his own reports, and they'll be a lot better than Mughira's reports, you know what I mean? So he has no interest in this. And this happens a lot.
Just to contextualize that, Muawiyah was the ruler at that time, and he was a Sahabi, and so he has no reason not to fabricate a report if he wanted to, right? But the fact that he's sending messages to other Sahabas telling them, can you please, tell me what the Prophet told you, so and so, it tells you that they were honest in what they were transmitting.
Yeah, right? Indeed. And here's another thing. You have, a lot of times, younger companions will transmit from older companions, and sometimes the opposite as well. Which shows, Anas ibn Malik, for example, the hadith, man ahabba liqa Allah, ahabba Allah liqa'ah, man kariha liqa Allah, kariha Allah liqa'ah, he transmits it from Ubadah ibn Samit as well. Now, he could have dropped Ubadah ibn Samit, right? He could have, and it would not even necessarily be a lie. He could just drop him and said the Prophet said, But he specifically mentioned that Ubadah ibn Samit told me that he heard the Prophet. So the fact that he added this person, this informant, or this other transmitter, this intermediary between him and the Prophet, shows that he's telling the truth. Otherwise, it's in his interest, to make it seem like that he has this close relationship with the Prophet, which he did, but to have this close relationship and that he acquired the hadith directly.
Indeed. So these are very good points. We think there are a lot of other arguments we can use, theological and historical arguments for Adat Sahaba, but it seems like these are the strongest points we can present, just to make this video concise and short. Now, to object to these many points we listed, the Shia and other sects from within Tashayyu' mostly, and the Khawarij and whatnot, they appeal to certain facts from history to negate adalat al-Sahaba. So we're going to go over some over here. Now, one of the major issues they bring up is the fitna that happened between the Sahaba. They say, how can you say they're all adul even though some of them fought each other? So in theory, how would you respond to that?
Well, there's no connection or relationship between two people fighting together based on a perceived injustice and whether or not they can be trusted in transmission, whether they'll honestly transmit something from the Prophet. Even if two companions hated each other, would this hate compromise the belief and the relationship that they had with the Prophet such that they would lie about it? Especially when we realize that their fighting amongst each other was on the basis of ta'wil, where both sides thought that they were doing the most pleasing thing to Allah at the moment.
So regarding this point, I think we've already addressed it in the second video. And so if anyone wants to further elaboration on this, I would suggest that they go to the second video where we address the concept of adalah, and we show merely committing a major sin does not necessarily mean that the person becomes a liar or untrustworthy in their hadith transmission. Now, historically speaking, regarding this point, they fall into several issues. They say, well, the Sahaba, look at the fitna, they fought each other. How are they all adul? Well, the question is, how many people do you think fought in this fitna, in al-Jamal and the Siffin between Ali and Muawiyah? You know, we have tens of thousands of Sahaba that existed at that time. And they use this historical occurrence to negate adalah from all of them. But if you look at the actual number of Sahaba that participated in this fitna, you'd realize how bad of a point it is. Ahmad bin Hanbal transmits a report to Ibn Sirin, the Tabi'i, with an authentic isnad, where Ibn Sirin says, هاجت الفتنة وأصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم 10,000 فما حضر فيها 100 بل لم يبلغوا 30. So he says, the fitna occurred, and there were 10,000 different companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And not even 100 attended that fitna or participated in it. Not even 30. So in this Jamal battle, there was not more than 30 Sahaba from both sides. Yet they take this historical incident and use it to negate adalah from 10,000 people. And the thing is, when you look at the Sahaba, the major transmitters of hadith, who do we have? We have Abdullah bin Umar. We have Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. We have Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. You look at these figures, you realize none of them to participate in the fitna. Right? Abu Hurairah just stayed away from this fitna, and he appealed to reports the Prophet ﷺ told him about fitna and just staying in your houses doing fitna, and didn't participate in it. And so this point they bring up is very problematic, and it's one of the main points they always bring up. And in reality, first of all, fighting with each other doesn't entail that they're untrustworthy, as you said, and a very, very tiny minority of Sahaba participate. So we're talking less than 30 out of 10,000. So that's like less than 0.5% of people. Now, in this context, another point they often bring up is, well, some of the Sahaba called each other liars, quote unquote, or they disagreed, or they questioned the transmission of other Sahaba. So how would you address this point?
Well, for one, at the same time they said this, you have to realize that they also, one, corroborated each other's reports, and two, sometimes you'll find from the same companion affirmation that the other companion is speaking the truth on some other matter. And so you have to look at it holistically. You cannot, just cut off a portion where someone is saying something, which can mean multiple things, by the way. When someone says, كذبت, it can mean multiple things, one of which is a mistake and not necessarily a lie, right?
Yep.
So you can't just take this small portion of an account and then not see everything else and how they dealt with each other and they trusted each other and transmitted from each other and affirmed each other's honesty.
So let's take an example. You have, I think, Aisha and Abu Hurairah.
Yes.
Something happened between them, and Aisha.
I'll give you an example. That's a good example. So you have, I think it's in the hadith, "Man ahabba liqa Allah," even ahabba Allah liqa'ah. someone heard this transmission from Abu Hurairah. So he went to Aisha radiallahu anha, and he was surprised. And I think my recollection is that even the way he phrased the question to her was like he was trying to get her to, say that condemn him and say that this is wrong. And these are in Sahih al-Bukhari and the other books. So instead of doing that, what she did was say that no, what he said is true. صدق Abu Hurairah. And then she explained that his understanding of the report is incorrect. And she went and gave the correct understanding.
True. Now, I think that pretty much summarizes our video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us and we'll gladly answer them. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.